Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Energy Markets podcast. It is 10:30 UAE time on the 12th of May, and Brent crude oil is on a bit of a move today, up over 1%, 64.74, and the WTI also now well above $60 at 61.85, a continuation of the big moves up where we saw at the end of last week, as some sort of optimism growing into the outlook for economic growth with the Trump tariff war looking like it's a bit of a stamp squid. It's not, Trump is caving. That might be the narrative. That might be the headline rather than the other way around, perhaps. Let's kick off this morning, as always, on Monday morning with Omar Najia, a derivatives trader at BB Energy. Omar, your thoughts on this recent recovery in the oil price now, on Brent at least, closer to $65 than 55, which is where it was trending down a week ago?
I don't think really anything's changed with the oil market. So OPEC's still adding barrels. Uh, Demand, I don't think, is going to change substantially. I think the stuff to do with Trump and his tariffs isn't going to go away. I think basically the history of kind of, window dressing and all this kind of stuff. The US has massive problems with the US dollar. It's going to continue to fall. That's going to drive inflation higher. If you look at the 10-year Treasury yield, that's today it's over 4.4. I think that's easily going to get above 5 and higher still, which means that their fiscal position is going to be really, really bad. So I anticipate basically higher inflation, higher basic, lower US dollar, and the US basically scrambling for deals to try and reshore, try and get some kind of. I don't think it's possible for the US to cut anything to do with their spending. Their debt's going to grow, their deficit's going to grow. We started off the year by saying that we're going to cut and all this kind of stuff. It's just going to grow massively, which means that weaker dollar, US spends more, inflation is going to rise, and that's not good for people unless you own hard assets. Even if you own the US S&P and all that kind of stuff, yes, it's going to rise, but inflation's going to rise with it. So at worst, at best, you're going to be standing still. At best, you're going to be going backwards, basically, but negative oil still.
Let's go to China with Victor Yang, the senior analyst at JLC Network Technology. Victor, of course, big news over the weekend is that China and the United States, in meetings in Geneva, regarding the trade war, that they seem to be indicating that they're coming to an understanding of an agreement around this that will see tariffs reduced. How is it? How are you interpreting the talks there in Geneva? How is it landing in China? Does it feel like this is a decisive moment?
Good morning, Sean.
Good morning.
Well, and is I mean the sentiment is positive. There's kind of expectation of them reaching kind of agreement. Well, hopefully in not a very far term, long term. But for now, the progress described by the official media is just substantial progress, and consensus was reached by both parties. So we do not see any details yet. And we do not expect this to be an easy negotiation. We expect it to take quite some time because, it's quite tough, very complicated. So, but basically for the industry as well, is kind of inspiring. I mean, they have been looking for such an opportunity, such an agreement. I mean, trade agreement between the two countries to help with their export. So basically, is quite positive for the market. Yes.
The idea that there would be a breakthrough on the actual tariff levels, let's say they're currently well above 100% in both China and the US. Do you expect that coming out of Geneva, there's expected to be an announcement later today that we will hear that those high levels have been reduced? Maybe not, there's not a full agreement about everybody loves each other, but that the actual tariff levels, do you expect that they will be brought down?
Well, I do not expect a cut in the tariff yet, so soon. But there might be further progress in the talks. And for some aspects, there might be more progress. For instance, in some aspects where they need each other more urgently, more significantly than in other aspects is possible, but it's impossible. I do not expect to see a cut in the overall run rate.
Let's welcome Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert. Of course, Narendra, India has been, and Pakistan, very much in the news over the last week for obviously the face-off, another kind of tense moment between the two countries that seems to now have found a positive resolution, or at least a calmness to the sort of hot face-off. How do you see that going forward? Is that and something that is now under containment? Is there any ramifications, do you think, for the global energy markets?
This is an old thing, as you know, the problem is that India's focus on building its economy to emerge as the third largest economy as soon as possible. And look at India's total GDP is $4.3 trillion on PPP is $14 trillion. And now just compare that with Pakistan. No comparison. They're $300 billion economy. Per capita income also is very, very low. Now, the total size of Pakistan economy is actually smaller than one large Indian company, just one company. So no comparison. But at the same time, they are in our neighborhood. They have a different vision as far as their future is concerned. Focus is more on things which are not really helping the ordinary people there. And according to us, I mean, they're entitled to counter it, but their focus mainly is on exporting terrorism and building up factories for terrorism and exporting them, export quality terrorism. So that's a problem for us. So the thing is that it's a bit of a nuisance for us. So off and on, sometime every 4 or 5 years, we have to deal with it. But that's not our focus. Pakistan, actually, to be very honest, doesn't really matter. It's just a nuisance. So sometime it gets a bit ugly, as it did the last few days. But as I said, but that's not our focus. Our focus is on building our economy and eradicating poverty and mobilizing energy for every single Indian and all that. So it's just completely, this hyphenation that happened the last few days was unfortunate. Not that we liked it. We don't like to be hyphenated with a country like Pakistan, which actually does matter to us. So, but things are back to normal, more or less. But if something happens, the armed forces will deal with it. But as far as the nation is concerned, direction is concerned, Pakistan as a country actually doesn't matter to us. It's a nuisance in our neighborhood, unfortunately.
And with the terms of the sort of hangover or the fallout, obviously trade continues, the Indian Ocean waterways continue. There's any tangible, obviously there's a very sad loss of life on both sides and so forth. But in terms of the global energy markets, nothing really to look at here from a hangover point of view.
No, there is no hangover. I mean, at the height of it, flights between Delhi and Bombay were regular. Shipping lanes were functioning, refineries were functioning, E&P, everything was functioning. There was plenty of oil available all across the country, just like water was available and everything. So for ordinary life, economic life was not impacted at all. There was something between our armed forces and their armed forces. We don't know about what happened there. But as I said, India has this tremendous resilience. We know how to, this is nothing new. It has happened several times in the past, as you know.
Clearly.
So we know how to deal with it. But as far as India's focus is, energy aspect is concerned, focus is now, continue to be what it was. strengthening the grid, modernizing the grid, at the same time setting up 4 more refineries, 2 on the kind of as soon as possible. So that's basically India's focus. At the same time, giving push to renewable energy and including nuclear power and hydropower. And at the same time, making sure that, since we know our economy is still fossil fuel economy, more mobilizing more oil, more gas, more coal, and setting up more power plants and so on and so forth. So there is absolutely, I mean, look, when you, like I sit in Delhi, I mean, something happened unfortunately on the border. Our armed forces were dealing with it. But as far as the ordinary people are concerned across the country, it was life as usual and continue to be life as usual. And that's. But if I make a quick point on China that you were
Yes.
just talking, my fellow panelists,
Yes.
you see that it's important. President Trump had his own ideas from day one. People like me, we knew it's not going to work because suddenly you can't really make America a manufacturing superpower and replace China. It does happen. These things don't happen overnight. So even if you've got a weapon like tariff and all that, it doesn't really work. But the important thing is that the rivalry between China and the United States, especially in our part of the world, Asia, Indo-Pacific, is real. And the fact is that China is doing economically very well, but the United States continue to be the dominant power in the entire Asian region, dominant military power, dominant economic power, dominant technology power. Has anything changed in terms of Trump's policy on South China Sea? No. On Taiwan? No. Indo-Pacific? No. And let's not forget one thing. Just one small statistics I'll leave with you just for your viewers' consideration and thinking. You see, China is projected very often out of ignorance as a kind of a country taking over the United States. Just one simple statistic. China has no important, significant military base outside China. The United States across the world has got 700. 700. So there is no comparison.
There is no, and let's hope they don't have to use them. But let's go to Omar and talk a little bit about Donald Trump making his first overseas visit. Of course, he went to the Pope's funeral last week, but ultimately his first international trip since he started his second term 3+ months ago. Omar, he's coming back to the Gulf as he did on his first trip in his first term. Your thoughts of his, what he's looking at here? Does it have ramifications for the energy markets that the world's biggest oil producer and the world's second biggest oil producer are meeting in Riyadh? What is your thoughts on his visit? Where is its intersection, if any, with the energy markets?
Yeah, so basically, the problem the US has is it's basically bankrupt. I mean, it's great having military bases and being the best and the biggest and whatever, but it's failing. I mean, it's falling apart. And obviously so, right? How do we know? If you look at their financial markets, if you look at the US dollar, it's cratering, right? If you look at basically their 10-year treasuries yields, they're going up. And basically they can't afford to pay their debt. So they have a whole cornucopia of problems. When they come to the Middle East, they want to basically try and deal with Iran. They have no alternative except finding a deal. Why? Because Iran has said, if you hit us, we will make a nuclear bomb. It's that simple. So what can the US do? Hit them, markets go to zero. I mean, Trump tariffs are nothing compared to
We
a
just
war
had the reports that the US and Iran have concluded their most recent round of talks in Oman, and those are ongoing as such.
Yeah, but of
do you
course,
think they'll feature as a major agenda item with the visit to Saudi, UAE, and Qatar?
He's not going to talk about the weather, right? He's going to talk to them about the geopolitical situation here. He's got them on side with other regions. The only reason he doesn't have them on side or he wants to discuss with them or could possibly discuss with them is Iran. The US has already made a deal with the Houthis. Don't hit Americans, we don't hit you. The Houthis hitting Israel, Americans not hitting back. That is extremely significant. The US can do nothing about Iran, absolutely nothing. The US can do nothing so what they're going to come here and talk about is the price of oil And because of all these inflationary pressures, because the US have their backs against the wall, the only thing that they can do in terms of reducing inflation is lower the price of oil, because that in itself is the only thing that is deflationary that I see on the horizon. Everything else is inflationary. A weakening US dollar is inflationary, right? Massive trade deficits, massive debt is inflationary, and it's going to get worse. So I think they keep the price of oil low, or as low as they can, and then they try and tinker around the edges with geopolitically. But I think the problem the US has is people are moving away from the US, not because they don't like the US, but because there are other opportunities elsewhere. The US says you have to do this, you have to do that.
And maybe
you have to do
as
that.
Narendra said there, one of the things, you don't have to waste all of your money building the biggest military in the world. You can use it.
Yep.
You can use it in other ways and still garner influence. Victor, I wanted to get your thoughts on the reports from Reuters that the latest import data out of China. China's imports of crude oil have moved up in the first months of this year, contrary to expectations at the start of the year that it would be a very bearish year for China's oil imports and consumption. We are seeing that in April, imports are back up above, nearly at 11.7 million barrels a day, and down a little from March, but ultimately still quite good, higher than last year. Your thoughts on the first 4 months of China's oil imports holding at a decent level and the outlook for that to continue?
Well, yes, well, actually, the country's imports grew by 0.5% in the first 4 months, and particularly in March and April. Well, and some of the imports are actually for storage, as state-owned and independent refineries ran low particularly in March and April. And in April, there was a lot of refinery maintenance among state-owned companies, and independent operating rates was not high either. So such high imports as in March are not sustainable. We expect them to drop modestly from such levels in March and April. Yes.
You said you expect them to drop modestly going into June and July.
Yes, June and July, because in May and June, because they are still running at a low capacity. Yes, and well, some of the purchase were for storage in March and
Essentially,
April.
what, taking advantage of the cheaper
No,
price?
yeah, yes. And independents were worried about difficulty in getting feedstock too at that time, say in February, and they purchased more for arrival in March. But after March, they cut their purchase.
Narendra, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Trump visit, first overseas visit to the Gulf this week. How significant do you think? What do you think is top of the agenda? What would success look like?
Good question. You see, I heard my friend Omar very carefully. You see, my sense is that President Trump's main idea is to actually attract more investment into the U.S. I mean, they have been already discussing with Saudi Arabia for $500 billion, and he has openly said that he wants it to be taken to $1 trillion. Very ambitious, but I'm sure that, given the kind of geopolitical situation and also energy transitions and so many other points, I think, probably Saudi Arabia is going to accommodate President Trump's will to the extent possible. Maybe not $500 billion, but I'm sure that is going to be much higher than what had been come out in the public domain so far. And at the same time, he is meeting with the GCC leaders, as we all know, and that's again going to be a very significant part of the whole thing. Let's not forget one thing. We may have like or dislike for this country or that country, but the fact remains, when you look at the geopolitics of the region called Middle East, the only country which is militarily capable of, economically capable of, to provide the kind of umbrella, call it security umbrella or whatever, is the United States. There is no other country which can do that. And at the same time, when you look at economy of the United States with super microscope, which Omar was trying to do, look at France, look at Germany, look at Britain, look at Japan, you will have more or less the same kind of issues because these are market economies.
Do you
That's how they
think that
function.
that Trump coming into the region this week, and then we just said the Iran-US talks
Yeah.
have been ongoing for some weeks now. Does it feel like everybody's kind of on the same side, that the tension has come out of this face-off with Iran? How do you see that going? There still seems to be a sort of a deadline on it. We must get this done now or else. What would India like to see happen there?
Well, as far as India is concerned, I mean, we would like to see Iran mainstream. Simple reason is that means that, they will dependence on China, which should go down. Iran is fast emerging as like kind of colony of Iran that makes countries like India extremely uncomfortable. We would like, to see, Iran asserting more strategic and economic autonomy as mainstream in the sense, we can import oil from there, they can come and invest here, we can go invest there. And at the same time, we would like to see more, kind of energy trade, in particular with other countries. We would like to see, north-south, gas corridor taking shape, that's between Russia and Iran, as soon as possible. And at the same time, we would like to see United States and Iran having smooth relations. Because let's not forget one thing, acquiring nuclear bomb doesn't really make you anything. We just called Pakistan's bluff out only yesterday. They said we have nuclear bomb, you can't do this. We did that, what we needed to do. So North Korea is bankrupt country. They have so many nuclear weapons. So let's put that aside. That bluff is very easy to actually call out. The important thing is Iran is a very important country for the United States in particular, the way liquid in the western part of the world. It's a Shia power. So it's a kind of, they would like to see Iran to grow as a counter to Saudi Arabia and maybe even Turkey. So that's what it is. Let's not forget one thing too. It looked like the Islamic world, but Shia power, Sunni power, Ottoman power, they are different dynamics altogether. And of course, the United States would like to place chess in such a way that it goes to the best advantage. In India also, why India is with more or less with the United States on Iran, because India also does not want Iran to acquire nuclear weapon capability. That's going to disrupt the geopolitical equilibrium, the entire Middle East and Central Asia, and that's not in India's interest. So you look, this is how it functions. But Iran has tremendous potential, especially when it comes to natural gas, and of course also crude oil. And India would very much like to import, because we are hugely gas deficit. We are going to use more and more gas, and if we can access gas from Iran, and especially if it's kind of, by a pipeline, nothing like it. So we all look for our national energy interests at the end of the day.
Yeah. Let's go to the survey question, which is touching on the earlier point. Will Trump's visit to the Gulf be bullish or bearish for oil prices? Bullish or bearish for oil prices? The bearish could be, we all agree that a deal with Iran, so Iran brings more oil supply to the world, and then that's a bit bearish. Or the exact opposite of that, of course, there's kind of more verbose language of warning Iran into sort of complying with the directions of America, and that not working out, and that can be quite bullish as things get disrupted. So, or no impact at all. Trump will come and Trump will go, and oil prices will still hover around $63, $64 a barrel. So, where do you think Trump's visit is for oil markets? Looking forward, Omar, on through all of these developments this week, we've got obviously the big announcement expected out of Geneva, which all the mood music is white smoke is going to come out of Geneva to signal some kind of a deal, which would indicate the market's already rising on some kind of relief rally there. We've got talk on Iran. Where do you think the markets are going this week in terms of direction? We've seen this upward movement at the second half of last week continue into today. Your thoughts of where it goes next?
Upwards on the S&P, upwards on risk assets, upwards on hard assets, and basically downwards on oil. And the other thing that I think you should pay attention to is the fact that going forwards, what's changed and and it didn't change yesterday, and it's been going on for a while, but it's accelerating, is the sale of US assets. People around the world are getting rid of US assets. How do we know? The US dollar is falling. They have a US asset, they sell it. They get the US dollars, they sell them, and they buy foreign currency or gold. There's a massive divestment around the world of US assets. I know it's difficult to understand, and I know it's quite new, but this divestment is going to continue. You're going to keep seeing the US dollar weakening. And the reason the US dollar is weakening and weakening as a global reserve asset is because nobody trusts the US. Why? Because it has confiscated, taken, appropriated, whatever you want to call it, assets of other countries. This weekend, I think it was Vance or Besant, I can't remember, who said that we might not pay the full value of US treasuries held by foreign countries. When somebody says that, this is why the 10 years going up. When somebody says that, and to expect that basically countries and people are going to buy the US treasuries, I'm sorry, then you must think that they're all idiots, but they're not. People are savvy when somebody says something like that. So US treasuries are being viewed as risky. You mark
Hence
my
why
words.
Bitcoin, I suppose, is heading north of
Absolutely.
100,000 and
It's
up
trading.
above.
The
It's
10 years
moving.
trading at 440. We're going to end the year at 550, if not 6%.
For
And that
which
is a
now, or
direct,
for the 10-year.
yeah, for the 10 year. And that's a direct result of people not wanting to buy US debt over the long term because they fear inflation and they fear therefore being quote unquote paid back by anything except money printing. The world has changed irrevocably so. So that's our view.
Victor, can we get your thoughts on just coming back to it does seem all the mood music in China or in Geneva between the US and China is going to give some kind of statement today that says, you know, the worst is over if nothing else, and we'll work out a pathway to normal again. But I wanted to get an understanding from you, what damage is already done in the context of China and its ability, you know, obviously we're hearing reports on container ships going from China to the US, even nearly coming to a standstill or seriously depleted. We've seen China consumer prices reported over the weekend. They slumped again in April. What is the damage already done, this trade war, in the context of China's manufacturing, and what is the outlook for that?
Yes, well, we already saw a decline in China's exports to the United States in April. And as we know, most of the orders from the United States were halted after the United States imposed tariffs of 145. And based on the official reports and some surveys conducted among factories, well, in the Pearl River Delta, say in Guangzhou, Zhuhai, and this sector where a lot of factories depend on the United States for their exports a lot, and their orders have plunged. So this is kind of difficult moments for them before they find alternative markets. Not long ago, we had the Canton Fair in Guangzhou, and more people visited this fair than last year. I mean, foreigners, foreign companies.
Visited what? Sorry, a fair.
Yeah, the Canton Fair. The Canton Fair in Guangzhou.
Fair.
Yeah, Canton Fair in Guangzhou. And there was a significant increase in the visitors to the Canton Fair this year. And a lot of them were from other markets outside the United States. So such factories are looking for alternative buyers, and some of them have been successful in securing, in getting buyers from Europe, for instance, or some other countries. But some others had not been so successful as them. So they're still trying to either finding either to find alternative markets overseas or trying to sell their products domestically. But it will take some time for them to manage to do so. So they are actually facing some difficulties. I mean, some of them, yes. So basically, is with the export sector. Regarding imports, the difficulty is not as significant in export because they can easily find alternative markets for most products. Yeah.
Narendra, last word with you. As we see this advancement, the Chinese and the Americans are meeting, the world's two biggest economies caught in a fairly overt trade war at the moment, but now finding a pathway forward. We saw the last week the UK and the US sign some kind of a trade agreement and so forth. From an India's perspective, and we're in the middle of this 90 days of suspended reciprocal tariffs that Trump announced in early April. What is the signals you're getting from the British deal last week, the noise from China, US, and Geneva? From India's perspective, do you think this can all be resolved by the end of the 90 days?
Well, we hope so, because you see, I mean, India would like to see a stable economic China, because that's in our interest. And at the same time, because if China and the United States, they fight, and they fight so visibly that the entire world gets a bit anxious. That's not good for the global economy, and therefore is not good for us. So we want to see, economic stability in China in particular, but we also want to see it in the trade order, and at the same time between the China and the United States. At the same time, we see this as an opportunity for manufacturing. Some of these manufacturers to shift to India. Like look at Apple phone today. There is a huge push now in terms of export of Apple phone from India to the United States. It has gone up by all close to 150% just the last month. So that's happy development for us. But that said, at the same time, we want to see a kind of a stability, because what is happening is what Omar is referring to. I look at it slightly differently. There is a kind of the emergence of the new international economic order, and the hegemony of American dollar is being challenged. Hegemony of American central bank is challenged. Is that a good news? It's not a bad news. So, and therefore, the developments he was referring to are basically the symptoms and signs of that change. This transition that's happening. Eventually, there are going to be more global currencies, just like the US dollar.
Just keeping on the sort of immediate time frame of this 90-day suspended reciprocal tariffs, are you seeing enough indications that by the end of it, India will do a deal with the US, China's deal will be done? We saw Britain last week. These deals will be done, and this moment of turbulence will be behind us. Is the worst over, do you think?
Yeah, right now we are in the process of negotiating with the United States. In fact, when the American president said that, that he was referring to the deal with the United Kingdom, and we thought he was referring to the deal with India. So because that's also in the pipeline and at a very advanced stage, and it's probably, hopefully, if you go by the reports which are coming out in the media, is going to be a very good deal. So I think that's fine. And we hope that between China and the United States in Geneva, they can basically work out something which is kind of mutually beneficial. Because President Trump has his own way of working, but the realities on the ground, especially when it comes to China and the trade and all that, are completely different. He will have to realign and accept the ground reality.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up there. I mean, if we are entering the second, there's no impact, 50% and bullish and bearish divided. We'll see as we put that out on social media where the rest of the world thinks. But the advancement of this 90-day suspended, although China is not a suspended, they're deep in high tariffs. They never got the suspended version that everybody else got. But the equity markets are back to where they were. The oil markets are creeping up. It looks like the mood music towards the worst is over on the trade face-off. Where does that mean for energy markets? If that is the narrative where we're going forward, is that it would seem a positive, given that the opposite of that was a big negative in April. The sort of end of the worst, it would appear the equity markets love it. The oil markets seem to start to like it. Omar Najia, as always, in Dubai, rock star. Thank you so much. Victor Yang in China, stepping in last minute. You're a hero. Thank you. And Narendra Taneja, thank you so much for joining us today, India's critical voice on the international energy markets. Have a great week, everybody. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. You too.
Thank you.